We'll start our panel now, and I'll be inviting the participants to the stage. We'll start with Ahmad Ramadan, an award-winning Syrian-Canadian author, public speaker, and LGBTQ refugees activist. Since his arrival to Canada as a refugee, Ramadan published his debut novel, The Clothesline Swing, winning acclaim and awards across Canada. He is currently working on his next novel, The Foghorn Echoes, and a collection of short fiction, The Syrian Survival Notebook. His children's book, Salma the Syrian Chef, published by Enig Press, is to be released in 2020. He was named among the top immigrants to Canada 2017, won the Social Activist Standout Award and the Independent Publishers Book Award for LGBTQ fiction, among others. He's finishing his master's in fine arts creative writing at University of British Columbia and lives with his fiancée in Vancouver. Ahmad, thank you for joining us.
Of course, thank you. I have no idea who that person you just introduced. I was just walking outside and somebody was like, come in, it's a panel. I'm like, okay, all right. No, I am Ahmad Ramadan. Hi. Please call me Danny. It's easier for everyone.
It is. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Our next guest is Lana. Lana Lux, born in, now it's going to be difficult for me to pronounce, I'm sorry, Dnipropetrovsky, Ukraine, I'm sorry. In 1986, she came to Germany with her parents at the age of 10 as a refugee. Lana began a degree in natural science in Mönchengladbach before training as an actor at the Michael Chesko studio in Berlin. She now lives, writes, and acts in the city of Berlin. The debut novel, Kolka, was published in 2017, and she currently works on her second novel. Hi, Lana. Come to join us.
Hi. And the best part is already done. The best part is how the introducer pronounced my home country, and also the country as a Mönchengladbach thing. Yeah, Mönchengladbach.
Yeah, it's difficult. I'm sorry. And our third guest will be Itamar Orlev. Itamar was born in 1975 in Jerusalem. His first novel, Bandit, published by Ahmad, won his first novel in 2016 and was also awarded the Raul Rabinovich Foundation Award for translation into English. In 2018, the novel was published in French and has been shortlisted for the Prix Femina and listed for the Prix de Premier Roman. In 2019, Bandit was published in Spanish, Catalan, and Chinese. Orlev works as a writer, literary editor, and ghostwriter, and lives with his wife and two sons in Berlin. Itamar?
Just to correct you, I think that the biography was a bit old, so it will be published in Spanish, Catalan, and Chinese. I thought it would be in 2018, but it will be next year. Well, all the rest is
great. Okay, I'm glad that you joined us, three of you, and I wish we have a very interesting panel. Well, I'll start by the topic of our panel. We're here today to talk about immigrants and about wandering writers, the name of the panel, and that's how you are described in the media and by whoever is talking about you and your works. I'd like to start with you telling me what it is to be an immigrant writer, how it is to be writing about somewhere else and some other time while you're sitting and talking and thinking in a different language than the one that you do practice in your daily life.
Should I start? I'll start. Give me a mic and I'll talk for hours. So I was born and raised in Damascus, Syria, and I moved to, I became a refugee in 2012 due to, mainly I was arrested in Damascus, and then I was released to the wild, and I was told to get out of Syria, so.
Why were you arrested?
They're not in the habit of telling you why you get arrested in Syria, so nobody actually told me why I was arrested, but I assume because I had a lot of, I did a lot of work in journalism. I was working for the Washington Post, for The Guardian at the time, reporting on what's happening in Syria under a pseudonym, under a fake name, but still I'm sure they had their ways. And I was also doing a lot of activism in the gay and lesbian community in Damascus that also might have triggered a warrant for my arrest. And then I was forced to leave the country, so I ended up being a refugee in Lebanon. And then I was welcomed by Canada, and now Canada is my home. I live in Vancouver with Matthew. And I write mainly, I'm obsessed of writing about Syria. I write about Syrian characters. All of my characters are going through the refugee experience. And I write those characters to try to be as authentic as possible, as genuine as possible about the refugee experience. Because we get a lot of media headlines and a lot of this herd mentality where all the refugees are exactly the same people. They're all under the same identity, they're all seen as one person, and they're treated, like even in the media they say like a stream of refugees is moving, or a herd of refugees are coming together across Europe or something. And that says that they're not individuals, they're just like a group of people. And I think that as somebody who went through that experience, as somebody who knows a lot of people who went through that experience, I can tell you that we are different people, just like you, just like everybody. We have different stories, we have different experiences, we have unique experiences that I think deserve to be told. And that's why I'm really obsessed about writing about immigration, because each person that each character that I'm writing about is a unique experience that is different than the next character, presenting different ideas of what an immigrant is. And I also write about Syria because I'm nostalgic. I can never go back to Syria. If I went back, I'll be arrested again. So I'm sitting there in Canada missing home and missing this idea of home that is in my head that doesn't even exist in the ground anymore. Possibly if I went back to Syria and I'm like, I don't even know how to navigate the city anymore. But I want to keep it alive, so I write about it all the time.
Do you think that being an immigrant, especially in Canada and the West, in a place that treats the refugees as this herd or this stream of people or this one big object, do you think that you have to be writing about refugees and about Syria? Is it an agenda of yours? Is it a cause, a thing that you have to maintain for some political issues, for example?
I completely agree. I think it is my responsibility as somebody who went through this experience and somebody who has the talent to write to be mindful of this experience and try to deliver specifically in English, in a language that I can navigate, that I'm fluent in, to deliver the truthful stories to the community. At the end of the day, the only way that Canadians are getting to know who Syrians are, especially that Canada, just in general knowledge, Canada has this concept of being a mosaic, where we are different communities coming together. Like we are mostly immigrants, and there's the First Nations people, the indigenous people of Canada, but they're mostly immigrants from all over the world. And Canada prides itself, sees itself as pieces of mosaic coming together and keeping the cultures of all those different immigrants while also celebrating the unity of all those different immigrants. And I think that the only way we can provide a genuine idea of what a Syrian person truly is, what is our food like, what is our music like, what is our ways of storytelling like, is through fiction, is through writing about those experiences. Or through meeting, like I can't go and meet the 35 million Canadians and just like shake hands with every one of them and I'm like, here, let me tell you all about Syria. So might as well write a book about it and get money for it.
Lana, you left Ukraine while you were a child. You were only 10 years old, and you're German. I mean, you grew up in German, and I think you've acquired a lot of German experiences and a lot of the German way of life. Can you tell me about this, how this affects your writing and how it indicates what you write about?
Yeah, it's interesting. So my face always expressed much more than I would like. So anybody watched me saw maybe the face expression when you told you're basically German. It's like
Great, tell me about that.
You
Where did it
know,
go?
when I'm here, I'm basically German. That's a sad part of it. When I'm in Germany, I'm basically like Jewish, Ukraine-born, German, writing, depressed artist, not belonging to anybody, being happy in Berlin because everybody is like me. Something like this. Yes, and yeah, I remember us leaving so-called home Ukraine because it kind of never been really a home because we were Jewish and people told me that I'm Jewish when I was in the kindergarten, so there were children who didn't want to play with me because they told me I'm Jewish, and I was a big kid, you won't believe. I'm a quite short woman now, but I was a big kid and I just punched them. And I was like, I'm not Jewish, you're Jewish yourself. And then I went to my parents and asked them what's about Jewish thing, and they were like, sorry. Actually you are, so just keep it quiet. And yeah, so we were kind of a majority in Ukraine. Also then it started a big community of American Jews. They came to Ukraine and started big communities, and we were part of this community. Everybody tried to be because there were food and stuff, you know. So we were kind of poor this time, and everybody who not hated Jews till the death went there to get something. So as a Jew, you were there, and yeah, actually we wanted to go, or it's not we, my parents wanted to go to Israel, migrate to Israel. And my father was dreaming like for all his life, being in his own country, being like a majority, being proud and have this feeling of being together, yeah. So then they started all this migration stuff. Takes you a while, just to get rid of your whole life. And then he took a flight 2 weeks earlier than my mom and I should go. I was 7 years old. I remember it quite well because it was the summer my childhood ended. And then he was there, and his first reaction was, it's so colorful. It's great. And after 3 days, it turns around, and he was very disappointed by the country and its people and its political situation and everything. And he wasn't sure about all the immigration stuff. And 4 days before my mom and I should go on the plane, he called us, like, also not legally because he had no money, so he climbed on a roof and just hacked someone's phone lines.
You sound like a great character to me.
Yeah, he would be. You know, somehow I hate him. But at that time, he was quite cool character. He lost all of it in Germany. He became just an depressed, old, unemployed man. And that's the sad part on it. On immigration, maybe all at all. Yeah, but then he told us not to go, so, you know, the man rules the family. Not mine now, but bad days. And my mom just, yeah, cried and was like, yeah, but it didn't help, so we stayed there. And yeah, my dad came back, and then they told me, we have a great news for you. We go to Germany. You know, you grew up with all the stories, with your grandmother, how the fascists, like you never heard the word German at all. They call fascists. So, and now, yeah, we have a new idea, we go there. Like, why?
Yeah, so instead of being the fascists or the Nazis, it's become the land that's waiting for you.
Yes, and I wasn't believing, till the last day. I thought, like, they told me we will go to Israel. Where are we now? They tell me now we are going to Germany. I can't imagine this. I won't believe it. And the day before we left, I made my homework because I wasn't sure. So I just made my homework. And also, on this day, I went the stairs up in our house and gave it to my friend, because maybe 1 week later we will be back, and I don't want to have the bad impression by my teacher on my stuff, Yeah. Yeah, and then in Germany, yeah, it's funny, because now I'm representing Germany here, I do not have a German passport. I have the Ukrainian one. Why? I can't tell you. It's just my depression stuff.
Well, no, I think you're presenting yourself. I'm also here representing only myself. And this is how we are here in this panel. Everyone's representing themselves.
But at my grant school, I had a teacher who told me, like, yeah, you should go. So they tell you which school to pick for your high school. So they told my parents just to keep it slow and just to pick the easiest one. And also she told me one time, you will never become a German. Yeah. And it was the last day, so I told you, I don't want to. But now I want. I will actually get my passport. Yay.
How did this affect your writing? I mean, unlike Danny's book, who is actually talking about the Syrian refugee in Canada and going all through these steps of being a refugee in Lebanon and then moving to Canada and all these obstacles of being a refugee, your book is written actually in German. And it's also about a child who moves to Germany illegally, and it's a whole different experience than yours. Can you tell me about that? And can you tell me also how the being an immigrant into Germany, that a place that you don't feel really belonging to, actually affects your writing?
Yeah, the difference between our both writing, between all the differences, is that I never wanted to become a writer. So also I wrote this book, I wasn't sure it'd get published at all. I wrote it just for myself, and actually all my art is only for myself. And most of the time I'm afraid to show up and show my art and speak about it, and I kind of hate it because I'm always afraid people won't like it, and when they like it, I'm afraid they expect me to do just good stuff, and maybe I will disappoint them. So, and when they are just, oh yeah, I'm overwhelmed when people talk to me, oh, it's so great, it changed my view on street children, it changed my view on prostitution, it changed my view on like children, sometimes at all. I just don't want to hear anything because I'm kind of ashamed of it. I didn't want change nothing. It happened by accident. I wrote it just because it came to my mind. I just don't want to take responsibility also for the success, It's kind of strange, but it's the truth. So I can't tell you all the same story, like, yeah, I want to stand out and I want like you to hear it. I'm happy it happened. Really, I am. And I'm happy to see people like a book I like myself, because I wrote myself a book I never read before. And now I do with the second one. So I try, because I know you guys will read it maybe, so it stops me from writing. But I try not to sing and just try to sing like, maybe it won't get published, so it motivates me. Yeah.
So how your immigration experience affects this?
You know, it's who I am, so it affects me in the same way, like my age, like my gender and my sex, like being black-haired and being white-skinned, being somebody with tattoos. It's all the same. It's like the way I go through life, people see me and react. And so it's how I become who I am, and that's how I experience to see the world, and that depends the way I telling stories. But I can't keep the migration part like something extra. It's the same thing as being Jewish. It's the same thing as growing up with parents who are like, yeah, like holding you in a glass bottle all the time. It's all the same for me. I can't just pick it, you know? Yeah.
Just a part of who you are,
Yeah.
and this is how it indicates the way you write or the things you write about.
Thank you for
Yeah.
this summing up. You never
I
get this
just
from me.
wanted to make
So-
sure that this is what you mean.
Just walk with her.
That's what a good therapist is.
Well, I studied 1 year of psychology, so I think it's kind of, it went through anyway. Itamar, you have a bit of a different experience. I mean, your book, Bandit, actually, it does discuss things that happen not here and that in this time. It happens during the 80s, and it's about a Polish guy who goes back to Poland to meet with his with an alcoholic father. You wrote it while you were here in Israel, but you did grow up in some kind of a Polish home, and you have this some Polish roots getting into the way you were brought up and in your house. I want to hear about this from you, about being somewhere and writing about somewhere else, and I'll get to the German part afterwards.
I wrote Bandit when I still lived in Israel, and Bandit, most of it happened in Poland, and I have to admit that since I start writing, I didn't want to be a writer too. I wanted to be a zoologist, but when I was 20, I started to write, and I think that most of the short stories and play and things that I wrote in the beginning never really happened in Israel. It was always in this gray area that can be in Israel, but in other places too. And it was really funny because, for example, it was very hard for me to give Hebrew names to my characters. I used to break my head on the names of my characters, and so many times they didn't have names. And I think that I always, when I wanted to write, so I found it not interesting to write about my reality, about my time, about Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, or I always wanted to write about the past or about other places. And
Was it because you lived in Tel Aviv and in Israel you thought that it's not interesting?
it wasn't interesting for me. It was very interesting, and I wrote many books, very great novels that happening here and now. But for some reason, this was the thing that drew me. And when I had to, when I decided to write this book, which is it's a whole story how I got this book and how I start. Should I tell it or?
Yeah, it's an interesting story, I think.
My father is a writer too. His name is Orlev. And here, 30 years ago, a guy called Ahmad, which is a filmmaker, came to him and told him that he would like to to write a script together with him that based on one of the books of my father, and my father said, great. So they sit and start to work on the script, and then they start to tell stories about their childhood. My father born in Poland in the beginning of the 30s, and Ami born in Poland in the beginning of the 50s. And when my father heard the stories of Ami, he was so amazed that he said so he decided that he has to write a book that based on the life of Ami. And the life of Ami are a very interesting life. They start in the Polish primitive rural areas and going to this very poor neighborhood in Wroclaw, and then and he has this very dark, sadistic, violent, alcoholistic, charismatic, funny, impressive father that destroyed the life of his family and his. And actually the reason that him and his family came to Israel in '68 is because they had the opportunity to run away from this father to Israel. Because they were Jewish. He didn't knew that he's Jewish like you. My father interview Ami and collect the story and had everything, but he never wrote this story. He claimed that the main reason is that he couldn't stand this Stefan, that he was too dark for him. He couldn't write it.
The father, Stefan the father.
Yeah, it's Stefan the father. And then 20 years after, my father told me, oh, here I have these cassettes that I interview Ami, maybe you would like to write a story based of them. And I listened to them, and I was amazed like my father. He gave me the cassette, he gave me a tape, because I didn't have a tape to put the cassette in. And I listened to the story and said, okay, I have to write it. And I sat and start to write it. And then after I wrote 50 pages, I gave it to my wife, and I asked her what she think about it. So she told me, yeah, it's nice. I used to be like a ghostwriter. I used to write the life stories of people that want to give it to their children about their childhood in Poland or in other places. And she told me, yeah, it's quite the same. So I understood that it's not good. And the main thing that I understood, that when you have too much good stories, they use you to tell them. Instead, you use them to tell what you want to tell. So I put everything aside and waited. And then my first son was born. And after a few months, suddenly I knew how to write the book. And I took only part of the stories and invented other and mixed everything. And I wrote it in less than a year. And to go back to what we talk about, for example, with the names, the beginning of the book is in Jerusalem. And I had the hero, his name is Tadek, and the father, his name is Stefan. And I had the wife and the child of Tadek that's supposed to have Hebrew names, but I couldn't give them Hebrew names. So all the first, for the same reason, that I never could, I don't know why. But then, on the other side, I had to give all this Polish name. And I had this list of names, and I just gave names like this. I was so enjoying to give all these Polish names to my characters. But I had the mother and the son. And then, in the second part of the book, Tadek come and meet Stefan. And Stefan asked him, what is the name of your wife and child? And immediately I wrote it. Suddenly, when I wrote it in Polish, although it was Hebrew, and from Warsaw, it was very easy for me. So I think that the distance helped me to deal maybe with my, with my present.
Maybe you have some unsolved issues with being Polish.
You know, I'm not really Polish. My father is Polish. It was funny because I wrote the book and 90% of it happening in Poland, and I never visit Poland. When I wrote the book, I visit Poland only after I published the book. And I thought about it, and and it was very easy for me. Like the Polish name, the Polish view, the reality. And I think that, first of all, I had the story, the real story that I based my novel on it, and I had all these books that I wrote for other people's. So I knew the views and the character of the people. And I think that my father, born in Poland, and he survived the Holocaust, but not like other Holocaust survivors, he always stayed a Polish patriot. For example, in the Olympic Games, we used to be supporting the Polish teams. But I think that there was something in, I can't explain it, but I think it's something in our common subconscious of me and my father. Poland was very real to me, so I wrote it very easily.
Writing about a place that you've never been and about the dialogue is actually happening in some way in a language that you've never learned and you've never spoken. How do you overcome this gap?
I just wrote it, I don't know.
You just didn't think about it.
Yeah, because I thought about it in Hebrew, it was only theoretically in Polish, so yeah.
Lana, in one of your interviews, you said that you felt, while writing your book, it felt like Samira, the main character of your novel, she was telling her story through your pen or your keyboard. Can you tell us about that? I mean, it's a bit similar to what Itamar just said, about the book just writing itself and producing itself.
Yeah, it seems like same kind of disease. Yeah, I kind of grew up with people in my head, always talking. It's okay, you get used to it.
It's great, actually. It keeps things interesting, at least.
Yeah. Always people who do not have this can tell you this. Now sometimes... no, it's different. It's different. And some of them are like, come on, fuck up, and they fuck up. And others like, fuck up yourself. It's my head, I can't. Yeah. Sounds more funny than it is. And actually, with Samira it was the same. So I wanted, it was a creative writing workshop for children's books. I was pregnant, so I thought like, oh, maybe I do stuff for children, some short thing. And then, yeah, Samira was there, and her story wasn't a children's book story at all. So I tried to, maybe we can just put this prostitution part away and and maybe also this criminal part. And she was, no, that's my story. And also her name, I told you. It's very funny. I ask always my characters what their name are, like always, and they always tell their names. And this girl told me, my name is Samira. And I never, and I swear, I never heard this name before. I never. And that was a moment I was kind of proud of my damaged brain, so it can produce names, which sounds really good. Like actual names.
My grandmother's name is Samira.
I know.
Yeah, exactly.
Boy.
I didn't know this name existed.
Yeah, later I told people, yeah, my character's name is Samira, and everyone, oh yeah, it's a lovely name, my grandmother and a friend of mine, and actually I had a Samira in my class, and like really, I was kind of disappointed, because it's what I want to say. It's sometimes when we authors or I get asked like, when did it start, or how you get this idea? I don't know, because there are so many things I see and hear, and I don't recognize them as things, but my brain just saved them and mixed up with other stuff, and then produced all these pictures and voices and stories, but somehow they came there, but I don't know how. Yeah, and what was the question, sorry?
About this process of writing while the character just invented itself and just talked through your head.
Yeah, so I had the whole story, and then I needed to show the story. I couldn't just like tell, yeah, she starts there, then she goes there, and then it finishes there. So For example, the first part is she's in the. Oh, I looked this English word like 1,000 times. Thank you very much. This woman is so great. Without her, I wouldn't be here at all. It's true. We both know. Yeah, like on Offnet, and I needed to show this. I couldn't just say, yeah, she's a wise and being there. So I gave her all my experience and all my images of my kindergarten. So I borrowed. So that's how it works. So this is a character tells me what happened, and I borrow them my experience to not telling it but showing it. And that's how it works. So parts are from them and parts from me. And sometimes they have like headache, and I had, but I never had, so I write about the stomach pain, which I imagine in my head. So, you know what I mean? Yeah, thank you. Just, so she stops speaking all the time.
Danny, you left Syria how many years ago?
2012, 7 years ago.
7 years ago. So the Arabic, and also we talked in Arabic before, the Arabic is still very vivid in your head. But you write in English.
Yes.
Tell me about this.
So I published actually 2 collections of short stories in Arabic.
Wait, before, in what language do you think?
In color, I think in color.
And in what language do you dream?
In color as well. I don't have languages. No, actually, like I honestly don't know. Sometimes it's just like a conversation that goes, and I wouldn't remember which language we're talking in my dream. And sometimes it would be like one word in Arabic mixed with one word in English, and sometimes Kurdish come around because my grandmother is Kurdish, and I don't speak the language anymore. I spoke it when I was 7, but like sometimes I would think of a word in Kurdish, and sometimes I think of a concept and I can't even name it in any of the languages I speak. So that's interesting. To go back to your question, I actually published 2 collections of short stories in Arabic. One in 2004 when I was 20, and one in 2008 in Egypt. I was living in Egypt at the time, and I wrote in Arabic in a language that is very, like, my writing is very poetic, very vivid. Magic realism is a really important concept for me in writing. And then when I knew that I was heading to Canada, I think my first thought was, I want to continue to be a writer. There's nothing wrong with people arriving to Canada and finding survival jobs, like working in a cafe or opening up Syrian restaurant, like the 100 million Syrian restaurants that we have in Vancouver at the moment. Everybody is opening Syrian restaurants over there. There's Syrian restaurants everywhere, which is great. Lots of Syrian food. But I personally, my first thought is I want to continue to be a writer. So I was like, I'm going to challenge myself to write this novel in English. And I wrote the whole thing, 120,000 words. And then I read it after I finished, like 2 years later. I was already in Canada. I finished writing the whole thing, and I sat down I printed the whole thing, I read it, and I was like, this is the shittiest thing anybody wrote in the history of writing. Nobody would like this book ever. I should burn it to the ground. I was this close to actually delete the whole thing.
Why? Because you didn't like the content, or the language was too poor for you?
I think I didn't like the content because I didn't realize it at the time, but I think the content was very triggering for me. I was writing, it's not a memoir, there's like ghosts and ghouls in there, and there's like witches, and God speaks to one of the characters, and death is a main character. So it's not a memoir, but there's a lot of who I am in the book, and reading it was difficult to like look in the eye of this like circus mirror that you know, like the House of Mirrors, when you walk in and there's like different versions of you that are inside of the house, and like one is short and one is tall and one's like crooked. I felt like I'm walking into like an endless house like that when I read the book the first time.
To be honest, when I read the book, your book, I thought of two things. First, if you had nightmares while writing it. And second, if it was a kind of therapy for you after all you've went through your journey from Syria to Canada.
My therapist, I'm very proud of being, actually, I'm diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and I talk about going to therapy all the time. And my therapist says that the only reason that I survived the experience is that I wrote the book. She said that writing the book was a healing process for me, and I didn't even know it yet. I digress, I'm sorry. So I put the book aside. I wasn't ready to read it again, and it actually stayed in my drawer for a year and a half, I would say. Nobody read it until my friend Tash, they are this trans person who lives in Canada, and we became close friends, and then they found out that I have the book, and they're like, and they're a writer themselves, they're British, and they're like, I would like to read it, and they read it, and they came back to me, and they're like, this book is beautiful, it's fantastic, it's wonderful. I'm like, I don't think so. Like, everybody says that they want to write a book, so I don't know, maybe this is me just being like everybody else, wrote a book, and they're like, listen, you wrote 120,000 words, from the first word to the last word, they made sense, and that's an accomplishment in itself. Can you imagine? Like, people can't even write 2 pages that make sense, so that in itself is amazing. And I started shopping it around, and then it got published.
Do you try writing in Arabic?
Do I try writing in Arabic? I think that, okay, so I'm not a writer, I'm an author. I think that I have a story in me, and doesn't matter which medium I use to tell the story. At the moment, my audience are people who speak English, and I'm fluent in using English. And my Arabic, the fact that I grew up with a flowery, expansive language that is very poetic, means that my English, as you read the book, is going to be very poetic and very different than the way English speakers would write. So that actually turned out to be my advantage, because I ended up writing a book that a lot of the people who read it were like, this is such a unique voice. I've never read anything like this before. And I'm like, I'm just thinking in Arabic and writing in English. That's the whole trick.
Yeah. So, you know, some people can say that this is fucks your English up. Yeah. But yeah, it does add this this layer to it. Why do you think that your readers are English speakers?
So I told you, I published 2 collection of short stories in Arabic, and the 2 collections are all about like heterosexual love, a man and a woman falling in love and stuff like that.
How could you do that?
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you. As a gay man,
We write about ourselves and
we write about ourselves. I'm also like, I've seen enough Julia Roberts movies to understand heterosexual love, I guess. There's
a lot of Ihsan Abdul Qaddus.
Read Ihsan Abdul Qaddus, yes, thank you. And yeah, like there's a pride always, and somebody's running away, and then they find her, and then she falls in love back. It's all the end of the book always is in an airport or a train station or some like movement of some sort, and people start making out for no apparent reason. So yeah, I can write heterosexual love, I guess. But I honestly, like, since I arrived to Canada, I am out of the closet. I am about to be married to my husband. I am proud of being Syrian. I'm proud of being Canadian. I'm proud of my understanding of the complexity of the word, my ability to see beyond the headlines of the news, and I want to write about that. And I don't think in the Arab world anybody would like to read about that. And I want to write about gay characters falling in love without anybody dying, or anybody being punished for being in love. So I don't think anybody in the Arab world. I think a lot of the people in the Arab world would like to read about that. I don't think anybody in the Arab world would like to publish that.
Well, it's a bit tricky because a lot of publishing houses are out of the Arab world, so you can use them. But the thing that I thought about was that you do represent a certain some people, you know, you are also an activist in the gay community in Canada. So why don't give a voice to people back home in Syria or in Iraq or Jordan or even Lebanon who do have the same story as you know, sexual orientation speaking. So I was just wondering, why don't give them this hope that a gay man could just get out of the country and live a very be gay married, be happily gay married to someone and living his life.
I hear you. I completely hear you. But two things. First, I don't actually represent anybody. I don't represent all Syrians or all gay people or all immigrants or all refugees. I barely represent myself, and sometimes I say things that I actually regret later. So please, if I said anything that is regretful, just forgive me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry in advance for anything that is horrible that I'm about to say. The other thing is, I think I already did. I get a lot of emails from people in Palestine, people in Egypt, Syrian immigrants in Germany who read the book in English and found it quite therapeutic, found it quite meaningful for them. And I think that that's one way to deliver that message. And at the end of the day, I think that, again, I'm an author, I'm not a writer, and languages can translate. The book is now available in Hebrew, and if somebody would like to translate the book to Arabic, if you have any contacts.
Actually, I'd love to do that myself.
Oh, I'm done. Let's sign the contract tonight. Let's get some wine and sign the contract.
I want to ask you a last question and move with the same question to Lana and Itamar. When we talked, you told me that you feel that in Canada people like to categorize you, you know, as the gay Arab man who has to write about his own autobiography in order for him to sell, and this is what's expected from you as an author there.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear about that.
Sure. I think that there is a mainstream understanding of what a Syrian refugee is, or a gay Syrian refugee is. There is a way that
Which is
people...
what?
We arrive poor and horribly disfigured and emotionally battered, but then the minute that you arrive at the airport, everything turns perfect. Everything is awesome, and music is playing, and birds are singing, and stuff like that. There's this understanding that the minute that you arrive at the airport, all of this package, all of who you are, is staying in Syria, staying in the Middle East, while everything that is good is about to happen to you, and you just become Canadian, as if it's like a magic thing. It's not like Cinderella and like the fairy godmothers that's going to click, and
Speaking
suddenly.
of Julia Roberts' romantic comedies.
Exactly, it's not exactly. There's no like. I think like Julia Roberts might be able to like play me in the movie about my life. I don't know. I think that there's this main understanding about that, and I come to my writing from a concept. I'm going to go so intellectual right now, called intersectionality. Anybody knows what intersectionality here? Please raise your hand. Wonderful, we have some people. All right, okay, I feel attacked. I feel very attacked. For those who doesn't know the term, intersectionality is the understanding of every person, not just as one identity, but as the unique experience of multiple identities coming together.
This was Lana had said before.
Exactly, yes, that's exactly what you were talking about a minute ago. The fact of the matter is that, for example, I am a gay man, I'm a Syrian man, I'm now a Canadian man, I'm a man, cisgender man, that means I'm not a trans person. I am a person with mental health issues, for example, and I'm not categorized under one of those identities. I'm all of those identities at the same time, and I'm the product of all of those identities coming together. Now, you might find a person who's also gay, who's also Syrian, who's also Canadian, who also has a mental health issues, but she's a woman. And her experience would be completely different than my experience because her identity is just a tiny bit different. And I think that's exactly where I want to write. And those are the characters that I want to bring to you. I think that complex identity is what matters the most. and delivering that complex identity is A, very authentic, lifelike, and actually very entertaining.
But you find this difficult to do in Canada?
I think that people like easy answers. I think that people like the idea of just understanding the word according to what they already know. So writing this kind of characters, it's challenging for the readers. I get like beautiful reviews. For the Clothesline Swing, I got some beautiful reviews of people who are very supportive of how complex the characters are. But I also got people who are like, I quote a review for you. One person wrote, this book is created by an author who's a whiny refugee who doesn't appreciate Canada. I'm like, okay, thank you for being racist. It's difficult sometimes because when I challenge somebody's established opinions, you end up with either someone willing to open up or someone willing to fight back. Yeah.
Lana, do you have this feeling in Germany? Before when I said that you're basically German, you didn't like it, and I'd like to hear about your experience. Do you also feel that you have to be in main categories? Also in regard to writing.
Actually, now I'm ashamed. I made this impression I wouldn't like it, you know, because actually I love Berlin, and Berlin is kind of German, and
Only the capital.
and I like how everything is organized, and I love the language, you know. I love this language. I never thought I would love it, because when I came to Germany, I hated it. It was like dogs barking. But now it's my favorite language because it fits so well to me. It's so precise, you know. I can explain everything, and some Germans actually hate me because I always like, do you mean this or that? They're like, so no, we have all the words to explain and express it very, very precise, and I love about it. And I also love to read some of the stuff, you know, like in original, and yeah, it's a wonderful language. So in this way, I kind of Jewish German now. And what was the other question? Sorry.
I asked if this, we love to categorize people, especially when they're foreigners, especially when they're different than us. We like to put them in.
Yeah.
So if you have this feeling in your writing and also in your daily
I
life,
had this feeling a lot. So that's why I choose an artistic name. So I gave up my real name, which would allow people to put me in this Russian girl box. Yeah, I wanted to be myself, like a comic character or something, you know. So I think it was a good decision to do this. And also, I have a very long story of migration, you know. I migrated when I was 10 years old. Until I turned 19 or 20, I was very, very sure not to stay in Germany. And I dealt with a lot of topics, like with 10, I should do everything for my family, like all the paperwork and everything. So I knew how they get treated, I knew how they feel, I knew how I feel. I lose my parents because there was nobody to stand behind me, so I had to stand behind them. And also I was always ashamed of them, and I was ashamed of being ashamed. And that was the worst part. And I knew also about, like, everybody thinks they know who you are. Like, your first teacher knows you are like kind of poor, damaged, stupid child. I I knew much more about life with Stan than she maybe would ever know. But I couldn't speak German because I was like 3 months in this country. So she thought I would be autistic because I was kind of genius in math. I'm not autistic at all. Yeah, such things, you know. Later you are just in the Jewish community and there are like German Jews, which are the better Jews because they are not the Russian Jews. So they tell you you are kind of Russian and not Jewish enough because your family doesn't know how to celebrate and to pray and everything. So you are ashamed of your parents again, ashamed of being ashamed, try to fit in, you hate all the prayers. You never get there to love them. Everybody tells you, you just keep going, then it will come to you. It never did, okay? Like, yeah, but one day you grew up and you see, I don't know how it would be if it wouldn't be like this, because that is who I am now. All these experiences and all these boxes and all these people wanting you to be this and that for them, like all these guys wanting you to be their doll, all these adults wanting you to be just quiet, all the Germans wanting you to be the perfect immigrant who are just fit in, just do the same thing, just celebrate the Easter and stuff. Like we are not religious, we're just celebrating Easter, just do it. So all this is one day so normal and so part of yourself, and then you're just yourself, you write stuff, you draw stuff, you tell stuff, and everybody's, oh, so interesting, and do you think it depends on this and that? And I'm, yeah, maybe.
But you don't, it does not annoy you anymore.
No, because I don't know, maybe I'm also kind of afraid not being the stranger and the other kind of person, because I don't know how it is not to be this other kind of person. I don't know. And so all I know is this, and this unsafety makes me kind of safe. Does it make sense?
It does.
So, yeah.
Perfectly. Itamar, how do you get across with these things? Are you expected to be some kind of immigrant, or... And also, if you can tell us a bit about the process of you leaving the country, moving in, because also it's a very different story than the garden.
Yeah, I'm actually not. I'm not an immigrant yet, and I'm not a refugee. Maybe one day I will be, but I'm still. I have where to come back. I wanted to say another thing that connected to identity, and then maybe I will go back to there, that connected to Germany, because I mentioned that my father is a Holocaust survivor and a famous one, and for me as a child, the Holocaust was part of our life, not only in the bed. It's hard to say it. Not only it was a childhood of my father. My father, when he tells stories from his childhood, it can be in Ghetto Varsha, it can be in Bergen-Belsen, and sometimes, the stories are very lively, sometimes they are funny. It's like adventure stories. This is why his books about the Holocaust are so unique, and his approach. And I was, because it was such a big part of my identity, every time that I used to meet Germans around the world, immediately I felt that there is something that connected us. We are sharing the same dark trauma, but from different sides. I talk about German for my age, not all Germans. And it was amazing for me, before I moved to Germany, that when I met a young German and started to speak with him, and then he knew my biography, when I told him, yes, but it's not your fault, you know, you didn't do nothing. So immediately it's opened them. And I had an amazing conversation. Most of them are in the last 4 years that I live in Berlin, with people that are my age, and feeling guilty is part of their identity, although they did nothing. And they're very, very happy to speak with me.
Feeling guilty is a bit Polish, isn't it?
Yes, but you have the German guilt, which is much more, much more complicated. And I discover stories. I will tell just a short story. For example, a friend of mine, her name is Rebecca, and she told me that her grandfather was in the SS, and he was a terrible man. And after the war, her parents just cut the relationship with him. And when they have their first daughter, they gave her a Jewish name, although she never been Jewish. They are not Jewish. And when she had her first son, she called him Levi, which is a completely Jewish name.
This is very bizarre.
So this is the way to deal with a trauma. Although it's not your trauma, it's the German trauma. And so
And also trauma goes into your genes, I think.
probably. And then I come to my identity. So the German don't really know how to eat me when it's come to writing, for example. I think that this is one of the reasons that I still don't have a German publishers for my book, because I'm an Israeli writer who write about Poland, who live in Berlin, so they don't know how to categorize me.
And you also write in Hebrew. You
And
don't
I
even
write in
try
Hebrew.
writing in German.
I don't speak German. My kid speaks Hebrew, English, and German, and I speak Hebrew, broken English, and no German at all. The reason that you want me to tell how we came to Germany.
Yeah, because it's a very different story, and I think it's
Yeah.
interesting.
5 years ago, my wife was pregnant with a second child, and we decided to move to a bigger apartment. It was summer. It was the war in Gaza, the big war, Tzuk Eitan. It was sirens all the time and missiles into Tel Aviv too, and we were looking for a new house. And between the alarms, we succeed to find our new apartment in Ramat Aviv Yeshana, Hayiruka, which is a very bourgeois, very nice to family, a nice apartment. Everything was too nice, but it was a very nice apartment. And we got this contract for 3 years. And what happened then in Israel that I felt and my wife felt, that in this summer something was broken. And suddenly all these demons of racism and nationalism and violence against the left-wing people was just explode.
Against the left, against the Palestinians, or against the
Yeah, yeah,
Palestinians, citizens in Israel.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, of course.
It's a whole package.
Everything. And it was a bit too much for us, actually. We always had this conversation, what is our red line, and we don't know what is our red line. But we always had problem with the occupation and with racism and all the things that connected to it. And we got this contract for 3 years, and we wake up in the morning, and we were really depressed. And then my wife told me, let's move to Berlin. So I said, okay. And we moved to Berlin. After a year.
Aliyah le Berlin, what is called.
Yeah. And actually what we did, we waited a year because the baby had to come, and we decided to go just for 1 year, just to go out from our reality and to look at it from the side. We said to ourselves that Israel is a very important country for us. It's where we grew up. It's the country that saved my parents, that came from Poland and from Russia after the war. But something was wrong then. And we said, okay, we'll go for 1 year. And the idea that we will live in Israel because we choose to live in Israel, not because we're just stuck here and complain. So we've been there for 1 year, and actually, I'm an optimistic person, so all the time I think that things will get better, but what we thought in the summer of 5 years ago that will be the peak was actually just the beginning.
Yes.
So we are still in Berlin,
So
still Israelis.
You live in Berlin, but you're not a doctor and you're not an engineer, so, and you're a writer and you write in Hebrew, and you're sitting there in Berlin, in Kreuzberg, you
I
said,
write about Germans.
writing about Germans in Hebrew.
Yeah.
How does it all connect?
This is my reality. I just wrote now a play that I had 1 year ago. I stayed in the U-Bahn and suddenly I had this idea for a play, and it just written it. It was written itself in my head for after 5 days. I had it, but I wrote another thing, so I put it on the side, and then after a year I just wrote it in a month, and it's a play that's happening in the beautiful garden of the villa of a concentration camp commander in Poland in '43. So I wrote actually a play that all my characters, except one, are German and they are Nazis. And it was very interesting experience for me. And it's deal with everything because it's not only the Holocaust. There are two poets there. It's connected to many things, but the camp that's around the world, it's coming inside, and it's a very bad end. And there's a big chance it will be published, will play it in Germany, I hope.
Is the Hebrew a plus or minus for you?
I think it's a plus,
How's that?
because it's my language. I don't really know. I can't write in any other language, and I think that Hebrew is a unique language because it's very. There's something very rough about Hebrew. It's very condensed. We don't have many words, but this is what makes Hebrew so special. I think it's a great language.
In your book, your main character goes back to Poland, to the mainland that it's been eliminated in some way, to meet the father, and it's very complex and it's very tense also. Do you also think that your immigration and not writing about Israel is kind of killing your homeland as well?
No, not
So
at all.
Freudian, but I had to ask this.
What do you mean killing my homeland?
You know, it's like killing the father.
Maybe, I don't know. The homeland, which is Poland.
Which is Israel.
For the character or for me?
No. I mean that this is a motif. This is a motif in your book that he goes back to Poland, and it's kind of illuminated in the mind. And he goes there, and he doesn't like it very much.
Yeah.
And it's very tense. And you left Israel, and you don't write about Israel also being in.
But my suspicion is that if I will wait another few years, I will start to write about Israel too. Like I could suddenly write Hebrew names in Polish. So maybe from Berlin, suddenly I can write about Israel, maybe. I hope, because there's many things to tell about Israel too.
Lana, do you think that your book actually also is talking about, is basically you have some unsolved issues with Ukraine, so that's why you've wrote it, and the main character is from Ukraine, or it was just random?
Yeah, actually, I asked my characters everything I want to know from them. So I asked her name. I asked also where she's from, and she wasn't from Ukraine, but from Romania. And I was like, sorry, I'm not going to do all the research. Would it be okay we put you like to Ukraine? I know so much stuff. I borrow you, and she was okay. Yeah.
So it's not like you chose the land, it just came up.
Yeah, I don't know. Issues is like, you have always issues with everything you know.
Of course.
So I know Ukraine, so I have my issues. Would I know other countries, I would have my issues with them, you know? So everything and every person and every subject I ever explored, like more than 2 minutes, I loved and hated it at the same time because there are so much different things about everything. And yeah, on the one hand, I love Ukraine. I was last year the first time after 22 years there. And I was there with actually I was invited with my book, but my passport ran out. It doesn't surprise anybody here, no. And I was there and I tried them, I tried them to get me something so I can go to Ukraine for 1 week and came back. And the Germans, the good Germans, they wanted to give me some stuff, you know, so I could go. And the only country doesn't accept this is what? Ukraine. So I didn't go there with my book, like my great comeback. But in the same year, I heard about a volunteer camp. And I went to volunteering on Jewish cemeteries. And there I met my great friend sitting here. Yeah, and we did a lot of work in hot and rainy weather around Lviv. And it was very hard. It was much more harder than I thought, and it wasn't well organized. And I remembered all the stuff about Ukraine, and I felt very German. So, you know, then I feel it, like everybody's more like me, and nobody's like catching me up and just organize everything well. Also, I can't. So there are a lot of me's, and I don't like it at all. Everybody's unorganized, everything is just late, and nobody wonders. And I'm the one, why isn't it organized? What's wrong with you guys? Yeah. So, you know, now I know Ukraine from the other side because it wasn't this area I came from. So it was safe for me because I was a very foreign person there again. I'm always safe as foreign person. I'm always safe as guest because that's the role I can play always. I'm so good in it. I'm just good in the first impression. I'm just good to be once somewhere, so I'm the best friend. But I'm not good in long-term things. Actually, I am. I have a family, but and a dog. But you know what I mean, like in general, not with just few people and animal. There could be more animal in my life.
Danny, I don't want to ask you about killing Syria. I mean, I grew up watching Syrian telenovelas and I just love it. You know, I've never visited, but I just have this connection with. But did you think of it like writing about Syria as mainly saying to yourself, it's long gone, I'm not permitted to enter this place, so I have to write about it, you know, to just kill it and make it here with me?
It's quite the opposite, to be honest. It's completely quite the opposite. I think that there is a version of Syria that lives in my head, this like alternative universe that is within the vast majority of my head, that I just have all of those characters live in it, and they all of my characters from my short stories, from all of my novels, live all happily in this like little Syria of mine that is in my head, that is I'm completely comfortable with. And I think that writing about that is really important to me. I don't read the news. I stopped reading the news about Syria 3 years ago, and I think my therapist like sat me down and was like, you know what, I think you should stop reading the news. And I was like, you know what, I think you're right, I think I should, yeah, thank you. So I stopped reading the news about Syria 3 years ago. I have generalities, like I understand what is going on, but I stopped like obsessively waking up in the morning and spending 2 hours reading the news and then being depressed for the rest of the day. I have decided that there is that Syria is a concept, and that concept can live in my head, and I am totally comfortable with that. The Syria that is over there is a complicated place that is worthy of it's worthy to see its beauty of that place. It's worthy to see the beauty, the history, the heritage, the people, the stories that come out of that place. And I think that what I do is that I keep those alive. And Syria is not this one simple concept. It's all of those things coming together. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I like that too.
Okay, we're out of time actually. We're 5 minutes late. I'd like to thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed our panel. تدرب على كل مشي جيا. شكرا للجميع. Have a good evening.